Divorce is never easy, and one of the biggest questions that comes with it is, what happens to the family home? In today's episode, we are focusing on the real estate side of separation. When it makes sense to stay versus sell, do you buy or rent your next home, how to set up two homes that work for your family, and how to support the kids along the way. Whether you're navigating a split yourself or supporting someone who is, this episode is all about making smart, practical housing decisions during a major life transition. Welcome to Who's in My House. Today we have Claire Speedie, a realtor with Chestnut Park. Thank you for coming.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been in the industry?
Well, I've been in the industry way too long at this point. I'm at 20 years.
Wow.
And I have been mostly an agent in the central core, predominantly referral based. And I've had a small team for a time. Then I worked with a team. I worked with Heap Zestrin for 5 years. And I'm now at Chestnut Park, and I've been there for about 4 years.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And so main focus, I guess, central Toronto, don't really go outside of the city at all.
Once in a while I do. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
happy to, but as long as I'm comfortable with the product.
For
You know,
sure.
I mean, there's certain scenarios where I just would be a little more comfortable referring it out.
Yeah. I think, personally, I think that's the best way to do it.
Well, it's just, I mean, you have to sleep at night, and you just want to feel like you actually are providing enough insight. And there's for sure certain properties that I just don't.
Yeah.
Don't
Or
know
when,
enough
or
about.
when we get into like, if you're going a little bit further north and then now there's septic systems.
Yeah.
Don't
I
ask me
know.
anything. All I can tell you about a septic system is you can't flush toilet paper. Everything else, no idea how it works.
Or a well. Like
Yeah.
it gets worse from there, I think.
Yeah.
There's just
So I
too
think
many
you got
things.
stay in your lane,
Yeah,
stick to what you know.
Totally.
And you also kind of have a little bit of a niche.
I do. It's funny. I've kind of evolved into it,
Yeah.
but about 90% of my business is what I refer to as families in transition.
Okay.
So it's professional families who are separating and divorcing, and often blending families. But
Yeah.
it seems to be a lot of the work that I do
Okay.
as of late. Yeah.
So was that kind of more in recent years? And then, when you first started, it was more like young families, upsizing, and now through life, this is kind of where you've landed?
Yeah. I mean, that's it. Like, of course, earlier on you have the first time buyers, and then everyone gets married, and then they have a baby. And so that was all sort of really, really positive, experiences. And now it tends to be divorce, which can be positive as well, actually. Like, it's not all, it's not all negative, but
No.
I think also I'm a mother with 3 daughters, and I'm divorced as well. I'm a single professional mother,
Yeah.
sort of living in the central core. So I know lots about the different schools, and having been through it myself, I think people just sort of gravitate towards me. So so that's become my niche.
Well, there is a big piece of the buyer experience and seller experience when you can relate to the person you're working with. So, I mean, for me, it's a lot of first-time buyers, or like you said, people who are kind of getting together, having kids, so upsizing, because that's the stage of life that I'm in as well. And so they'll naturally gravitate to me because we can relate to each other.
Of course, yeah.
I bought my first house 5 years ago, so it's still pretty recent.
Yeah.
Whereas, they might feel a little bit like, I've had buyers tell me that they worked with an agent who had been in the business for 30 years and felt like they didn't really understand because
their
it was
needs.
And I mean, it's just something nice when you can relate to the client.
Yeah, for sure. And it's such an emotional time, and I think it really is it's a nuanced relationship, simply because people are being pushed in a lot of ways, right? There's so many changes. There's lots happening with their children and their lifestyle, and they're having to pivot in a way that often one person was sort of comfortable and aware of, and the other person is a little bit further behind. So there is sort of that emotional piece to it, which I actually find really interesting. Like, it's tricky, but it's you really do feel like you're actually helping people through it. So that's my niche.
Obviously, when we come to a time where there's a separation, there is a pretty big decision.
Yep.
Do you stay in the house? Do you sell it?
Yep.
You know, walk us through when it makes sense to stay in the home versus sell.
Well, I mean, it comes down to the finances, first of all. You know, I think the most important piece is that whoever chooses to stay can really finance living in the house and living comfortably without a lot of stress. Because I've certainly seen many scenarios where one party has tried to stay, but the level of stress within the household is just so high, and that emanates throughout the home on a daily basis. Like the kids feel it, the person staying there feels it, because they're just trying so desperately to keep the home.
Yeah. And that's also assuming that they have the funds to buy the other party
That's
out, right? Because that
Yeah.
can be a pretty significant expense.
And when they do that, often there's no other funds for anything else. Like the vacations are gone, schooling options are gone, you know, just the normal day-to-day activities that the children had.
Yeah.
Everything's sort of minimized.
So in an effort, I guess, to stay in the home, they're sacrificing a lot of the lifestyle that they've had before.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what happens also with mothers in particular is there's this feeling or this sense of, you know, I have to keep the home. Come hell or high water, I want to keep the home for my kids, you know, but what I see sometimes is they certainly try and it can work. And if it can work, amazing, you know, because it's certainly very grounding for the children. But often I get a call, you know, a year later from the overwhelmed mom who's just like, she's just tried so hard and she's really sort of diminished herself throughout the process because she's not looking after herself. Like she's trying to literally do everything to keep the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough. And this is I mean, when you get to this transition, you're also dealing with fresh emotions because when people purchase a house together, when they get married, they're not planning for a divorce. It's something that you kind of tell yourself, I know the statistics, but I'm not that person.
I know.
And so you go in, you're not thinking about, and why would you? I mean, people don't want to plan for the worst because then it feels like you are essentially manifesting it to happen. Or kind of leading yourself down that road. So you get to this point and now it's like, okay, well, what do we do? And there's so many things to manage. So having someone, you know, like yourself who deals with this often, or having an agent who can relate and be empathetic and help guide with those very complicated emotions is so critical.
Yeah. And I mean, I think also having the resources, like I have sort of a toolkit at this point in terms of mediators and, you know, family lawyers and financial planners, you know, I sort of have it all lined up so that if somebody needs that additional psychiatrists, child therapists are a big one as well. Like there's just so many areas that require support during that time. So I think it's just sort of, I'm a little bit of like a one-stop shop in terms of the process.
I think the best realtors are the one-stop shops. You are the project manager, the person that the client can come to with whatever they need, and you are the one that can find it for them because then they don't have to think about anything else. You are the person. For sure.
And because emotions are just so raw, sometimes, I mean, I always say, like, I just feel like the first year of divorce is essentially a complete fog. And people should really just give themselves a pass in terms of the choices that they make, perhaps things they say, their behavior. Like they're going to make mistakes during that first year simply because it's just so emotional. I mean, it's just such a loss. Yeah. You know, so I don't know. I find that if I can sort of support them through that, they come out, you know, better in the end. But it just takes time.
There is also a piece of, well, we saw a lot of this in the last, I guess, say 2021 and 2022, the impulsive decisions.
Totally.
And when you're going through such a big life change and transition, making a quick impulsive decision before you've really had time to sit with it and navigate it is, I mean, even with buyers when they're moving into a home and they've got, you know, we've bought and we're going to our buyer visits and they're looking at all these things that they want to change and they're like, I want to take this wall down and I want to do this, and I'm like, move into the house, see how you feel with it, because you might move in and realize that wall is really handy, or you really like you don't want to put in all this work that you'll regret later. And so very similar to that, give yourself some time, figure out what is going to be best for you and your family, and then you can kind of take the next step.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think, trying to just give yourself that first year so that you can make an informed decision really makes sense. Sometimes that it can make sense to rent for the first year. I wouldn't say renting for particularly long makes sense. I see that as a mistake, certainly amongst some people that are getting divorced. They just rent for way too long and lose a ton of money.
Right. So sinking the cash that they had into the rental, and then that kind of screws them in the long term for being able to purchase again.
Yeah. And I must admit that, I'm sad to say this, but it often happens with the women more than the men. And as a professional woman, I do find it a bit sad sometimes, because I think the women, and these are I'm referring to educated professional women. I think they find it tough to accept that the home that they had is not going to be the home that they're going to be able to purchase. And as a result, they end up renting. But then 1 year turns into 3 years, which turns into 4 years. And that down payment that they had towards the house has now been eliminated. And unless they have a job where they are really making a substantial increase in salary, the increase in salary cannot keep up with the appreciation of the market.
Yeah.
Even now, even if you're just appreciating by 2-3%,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So the house that they could have afforded, initially, or, after 1 year of renting, they can't afford after 4 years. So they come back to me, and it's much, much worse. Whereas the men, I hate to say it, but they will often buy something that they would consider sort of a downgrade, but they get into the market a lot faster, often right away. They'll get the condo or the townhouse or something, an in-between property. And guess what happens? Most of the time it appreciates. So I get the call, year 4. Well, they've made money on the market, and now they're going back into a similar product that they had before.
That they had initially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there's also, generally women, especially mothers, tend to nest more.
Yes.
And so they get into that rental and they just want to stay. My mom has been in my childhood home, is still there, and was there well before I was born. And it's, it's a great house, but it's a lot of space for one person.
Sure.
But that's home. And so why leave? Why let go? So I can see how when you get into the rental and you kind of make yourself comfortable, you start transitioning and really figuring out what life looks like now with the separation or the divorce, it can be really hard to pick up and move again.
Yeah, that's right. But what happens is, from a financial perspective, the women are in a much more difficult situation over time, right? Because they're not investing in the market. They're not making any money, because why? They don't own a product, and as they get into their 40s and 50s, especially during a time when professional women are trying to catch up a little bit because they've now had a few kids and they've recovered, right? But that takes time. It takes a little bit of time away from your professional environment. So they're just sort of getting their groove again. But guess what's happening to the men? They're in their absolute peak, right? So they're killing it financially. It's the most money that they're going to make is most likely in their 40s and their 50s. Come 60, it's going to probably drop, right? Yeah. And the women are lagging behind, because they're not investing.
Taken 3 years off for various maternity leaves, and now are finally just trying to play catch up.
And then they're renting.
Yeah,
they're putting all their money into a rental that does not appreciate, that they cannot refinance, that they cannot make any money off of, right?
So how do you manage that? When you have, the woman will kind of tell you that she's leaning towards renting. How do you manage that and kind of help guide them through that potential possibility?
Well, I'm pretty frank with them, to be honest. I try to help them really think it through, because I have seen so many women that come back to me and are disappointed with the choice that they made, and they can't recover in the same way. So sometimes I try to talk about the notion of a home. What is a home really? Is it about the physical space, or is it about what one creates in a particular space?
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes when they think about that a little bit more, because I think that that's what a home is it's really more about the environment, right? Like you can be in some crappy place or in some mansion and not feel connected or aligned with the home. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You walk in and you don't feel that connection.
Feels cold or sterile almost.
Yeah, like it doesn't, you just don't have that warmth to it, you know? Whereas you can be in like a really cozy, warm place where mom is and siblings are, and you know, the soup's on, and like you just feel that sort of warmth. So sometimes when they think about that, like, you know, about creating a home in many different environments, I find that can help them. But they want to hold on so tight sometimes.
Yeah.
Which I understand, you know, but it's just sad to see sort of the men, to be honest, coming out of it much more financially stable.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on, I don't even know what the proper term would be for this.
Yeah.
But when families have kind of keep the house as the family home, and the parents are the ones that alternate.
Yeah.
So a couple years ago, I was helping a colleague out with a rental listing that she had, and the tenants were a divorced couple who this was going to be their spot for when they weren't in the family home. So essentially it would be like 1 week on, 1 week off with each parent. Kids are always in their home base. They have the same room. They have the same space, whereas the parents are the ones that alternate. How have you found that to work? Have you dealt with this at all?
Yeah, so it's called nesting.
Okay.
And I did it myself for the first year and a half. The girl's dad and I would just go back and forth. And it's often done for the first year or two as the children are getting used to this change. And as the parents are, you know, going through the legal process and, you know, essentially getting all the legal documents done. So I think it can be really great. It's a great way to ease everyone into it. Long term, it's difficult, right? Because people move on, the parents move on, perhaps they connect with someone else, you know, establish a blended family, or just even want to live in a different location. Also financially, it means that the funds are tied up in that primary asset, right? Which tends to be a lot more expensive. So they can't, if the funds are all there, they can't necessarily set themselves up like some people can, but most can't go and buy a condo to live in or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think it can be really effective, but it just, you know, most people move on from it.
So I guess you would say that is an effective strategy for that first year, like we said, where we don't want to make an impulsive decision. We want to take some time and settle into new norms. And that is, I guess, kind of one of the good ways to move forward for that period.
And the kids can, you know, they're still in their same environment with all their friends, and they can sort of get used to mom, you know, one person going and the other person coming back kind of thing. So it's because it obviously is really emotional for the kids, but we did it, and I'm glad we did.
And on the topic of kids, how do you find different age brackets react to this, and how do you help support the families depending on kind of the age of the kids? You know, I am a child of separated parents, but my parents separated when I was so young that I don't even remember.
Right.
So I have no emotional, you know, impact from that because I didn't witness any of it. I think I was around 2. Yeah. So I have no memory. Yeah. The only norm I know is my parents not being together.
Right. And so, I was actually going to say that. So if the children are younger, I find it's really all that they know.
Yeah, they're more adaptable.
From sort of 5, I'd say about 5 until age 12, that's the toughest, right? Because they have their daily habits with both parents. You know, they're certainly really dependent on them in terms of just, you know, their day-to-day lives. So I think that is certainly the most emotional. And then teenagers, you know, they're not fully formed, but they're certainly getting there, and they've also just naturally become more independent themselves and are sort of exerting themselves to develop that independence. So I find that they're more accepting, but that's always the most painful helpful piece. I would say with the little ones too, and I did this with my little one because she was 4, my youngest, Sloan. We only did 2 days that one parent would be away from her when she was little, right? So you can organize a schedule. Some people eventually do, 1 week on, 1 week off, but we did it so that it was really only 2 days that she could miss. If she needed to miss a parent, it wouldn't be that long.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And are there any specific things that you'll help do to manage depending on the age group?
I don't actually think that it's divorce itself that causes a ton of trauma. I think it is how the parents treat each other and how they model, in front of the kids. Like, divorce doesn't have to be some horrendous scenario, in terms of the treatment of the other person. Like, my ex-husband, he's a very good friend of mine. Like, I love him. He's a really good dad. Like, I'm thankful to have him in my life, and his new fiance as well. Like, she's been a great addition to our family, to be frank, like she has been a gift to all of us. And so I think a lot of it's just, how you choose to behave. And I mean, personally, like I remember, the first year it's very raw, like it's certainly really emotional. But I do remember, PJ and I having this conversation of like, if the other person were to get sick, hypothetically, like get cancer or something like that, and you'd had this tumultuous, like, screaming conflict back and forth for years, like you'd have to take a good look at yourself and your contribution to your child's other parent being ill and being unhappy or mentally ill, right? Like, do you really want that for your kids? I don't really think so. So, I mean, that's what I just try to say is a lot of it's like, how you choose to treat the person that you had a child with,
Yeah, I agree. I have family members where one parent would speak very poorly about the other parent, and it just creates an estranged relationship because that's all the kid knows and hears. And then they will kind of, feel like they're being pitted against each other with the parents. Whereas, I was also very fortunate in that my parents had a very amicable separation, and
nice.
My birthday parties growing up, both parents were there.
Yeah.
It was never like I can only have one party with my dad and then one with my mom. Like they were able to kind of come together for me when needed. But I will say, I mean, I know you said teenagers are kind of independent. That was the time I found it the hardest.
Interesting.
Not the separation, but alternating households.
Going back and forth. It is annoying.
I don't know what I want to wear tomorrow. I don't, like that kind of stuff. My mom's house was always my home base, so all of my stuff was there, whereas my dad's was just whatever I left the last time. And so I would find myself not having things that I needed or wanted, and not really the space. So I know that was one thing we wanted to talk about. How can, parents create a comfortable space for their kids so that they don't feel kind of dread going to the other parent's home?
Well, I mean, just in terms of the logistics, it doesn't always work, but ideally if you can have 2 of almost everything, like the hairspray, the nail polish, like every single thing, literally have both in each space, the jeans, all of it. Like that would be one thing that I would certainly suggest. And then also having like decorative items that are representative of the other parent, like photos of the other parent. Like if there's a special, like with younger ones, like blanket from mom's place, or, anything that's a source of comfort to them that's a reflection of the other parent, I think should just be a part of that home, both homes, like going back and forth, what else is there? In terms of getting children comfortable with new spaces, I always would try to, do things like, okay, let's make a plan around painting the room. Like, how are we going to paint the room? Like, what are we going to, what ways are we going to decorate it and make it inclusive?
Yeah. Have some more autonomy over their own space. So it feels like theirs and not dad's versus mom's.
Yeah. I was my ex's real estate agent when he bought his home with his fiance, kind of thing. And I mean, I'm not going to lie, like it is, you have to sort of get yourself going to go up and like pitch this to your kids, it's like, here's your new life, 1, 2, 3, go kind of thing. But, like being a part of it really did help. Like just being, I was invited into like, okay, how are we going to decorate this? Like, let's go to IKEA, let's go to HomeSense. Like, let's, so I think my girls really felt like I was included in that process and welcomed in.
And you also could help when you were actually house shopping and be like, this is a space that I could see the girls really liking.
Oh yeah, no, I found it like right before it went on the market. I'm like, this is where they're gonna live for sure. Like I knew it. I knew that it was the best place. I only took them to 3 places, and I was like, I think this is the one you should get, and they bought it. So,
I mean, that's a very amicable divorce that they can still. I mean. That you're in a place where you can actually help him with the person that he's moved on with find their new home.
Well, yeah. I mean, I also have been lucky in that PJ's fiance Jackie has been just like a stand-up person. Like there's never been any like she's always been really nice to me. There's never been any problems. She's kind to my children. She's just like beyond, almost just a person that's just beyond any petty silliness that some people can get into.
The jealousy or the discomfort.
Like she just literally doesn't have it, and so I'm at that house all the time, and she's been such a good sport about it. And to be frank, she makes PJ a lot happier in life. Like there's a lot of times where I look at her, I'm like, that was a good choice. Like I should have thought of that. Like just the way, like she makes them happy, which helps me, happy dads. It's really important, for the father to be happy because it makes it easier for the mother.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's really great when the new partner is comfortable with the exes having a form of relationship, because I've definitely witnessed the new wife or the new husband having some serious jealousy and, kind of being the one that says you need to cut off this relationship. You can't communicate, which, I mean, that's not fair to the kids.
It harms the children. Yeah. Those are the people that are hurt, in the end. And, back to what you were saying about sort of, when there's insults between two parties. I mean, I think people forget that when you insult, someone's father or someone's mother, you are insulting them. You're insulting the child too. That parent is a part of that child. Yeah. At the end of the day. And I think some people just don't really register that.
And also don't think about how it's going to make the kid feel being in the middle. Yeah. And, whether it's those feelings now, the child will manifest those feelings and think, okay, mom said dad's a jerk, so he's a jerk. And like mom said all these things about dad, or dad said these things about mom, and that's now what you start to believe. Or that now you feel uncomfortable talking about either parent with the other because that's what it's going to lead to. And that, I think, goes back to what you said about how they treat each other and the emotional trauma that the kids will inherit if the parents aren't. I mean, you can hate each other, but just don't let the kids understand that you don't respect each other.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Totally. I mean, there's a lot of hardship with divorce for sure, but there's also, I mean, I see quite a bit with the women. It can also be quite empowering because I see the transition that some of these women make. A lot of them really do get themselves back a little bit, as time goes on, because they're able to create a space that is unique to them and consistent with their own values. They're often going back to work and earning, some money for themselves. They're also showing their children, if they are in a dynamic that is unhealthy, that, mom can step out and build confidence and, build her own life, her own way, and make her own money. And I think these are, really valuable lessons. And I do see that transformation quite a bit with some of the women.
But also just for the kids seeing that their parents, I mean, seeing that split rather than having to witness disrespect and horrible arguments in the home, I think is huge.
Which goes back to the notion of like, what is a home?
Yeah.
You know, is it a physical space that we have to try to maintain come hell or high water, even if people are completely miserable and totally mistreating each other? Or is it, you know, is it something else that might be, you know, half the size, you know, in a different location, but filled with love and warmth? You know, and one thing I did find when I went through my own divorce, like the number of friends that came to me and said to me, you know, I grew up in an environment where my parents hated each other. Like I wish my parents had gotten divorced.
Yeah,
you know, I wish they'd left.
And you hear a lot, I hear a lot of people will say, well, we're staying together for the kids. But
Totally.
I think the kids would rather not be in that environment. I'm grateful that I never had to live in a house with two parents that hated each other.
That's it.
Even if it meant having to lug my stuff between two houses, I didn't need to grow up in an environment where I was witnessing argument, conflict, and disrespect.
Totally. I mean, and I think, you know, the kids, it's also a massive pressure if you feel like you're trying to maintain everyone's like emotional stability and you're 12.
Yeah, the kids take that on for
you know,
sure.
I mean, it's way too much. Anyway, so it can be, I do sort of see that empowerment. The men are often, like, interestingly enough, the ones that need probably the most support, I find, from me, because I think because I'm a mom, they, you know, and if they've lost their wife, at first they're a little bit like a deers in headlights, a little bit, like they just, you know, aren't quite so sure. This isn't everyone, but they're looking for some sort of feminine guidance. And so I find I can help them be like, okay, like, where are we doing like Sunday night football? Like, let's choose a space that'll work for your Thanksgiving dinners. Like, can you get a large table in here? Like, let's, you know, let's really think through the space so that they feel like their home isn't just like, oh, the other place that they go to, but a true, like, you know, a space that the kids want to connect with to the same degree. I think it's really important for the dads. And sometimes you see the dads actually having more one-on-one time with the kids over time, and they really gain confidence as dads.
Yeah, because they are kind of forced into the one-on-one.
Yeah.
This is a little bit unrelated, but unrelated to real estate, but related to what you just talked about. I must have been a year ago. I was telling my fiance and I were talking about how, on average, if the husband passes away first, the woman will be fine for many, many years and will live much longer. Whereas if the wife passes away, husbands are much more likely to pass away sooner. And we were kind of talking about why that is. And my joke was, well, you need me more than I need you. But
it's true though.
But then I did some digging because I was really curious what that is all about. And what I read was that essentially men, especially as they get older, rely on their wives as their support system, as the person that reminds them to go to the doctor, the person that reminds them that they need to book this appointment, take care of themselves, acts as that support, especially emotionally. They're maybe less likely to talk to their friends about their emotions, or as they've gotten older have kind of pushed their friends aside. Whereas women will often maintain relationships longer term, have other outlets for kind of talking about their emotions, what they're going through, and will be able to continue that without the man, whereas the husband will have a much harder time.
It's true. I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Scott Galloway, but he's constantly talking about this topic and actually what is happening to adolescent and young men. Like it's a real concern, just the degree of loneliness that perpetuates over time, because most men's best friend is their wife. Yeah. You know? And I don't know if there's that course. It's called, like, it's about happiness at Harvard. So Harvard does a course and it studies happiness. And a lot of these findings that you're mentioning are discussed in the course. But it also says, I hate to say it, but do you know who the happiest two people are in life? Like, statistically, based on like psychological studies, sociological. Okay, so it's single women and married men. You know, because
I've heard this.
Yeah. The married men get a lot of support when they're married, right? They're really loved. They have their best friend there. they're nurtured and really looked after. But unfortunately, it doesn't always happen for the women. Not to bad. I mean, I'm pro-marriage. Don't get the wrong idea at all. But it's just it is the reality. Suicide rates, abuse, economic disparity are, very significant issues for married women, unfortunately.
Well, I also think that, traditionally there was less of a focus on going to couples therapy and maintaining healthy relationships. It was more about traditional values. Yeah. Whereas I think a lot of relationships now are valuing going to couples therapy before there's even a problem, so that they can learn how to communicate and hopefully foster healthier relationships moving forward, as opposed to ending up in those situations where you are just miserable. Yeah. And the full circle was when we finished this conversation, I was like, he goes, well, if you die first, I'll be fine. I'll just go on a boys trip. Yeah. And I was like,
and the boys trip ends.
Yeah. I was like, you're
and then
a jerk.
They come home alone, and they'll miss you like crazy.
Of course, yes. I was like, you will be devastated, but I have comfort knowing that he does have friends that he can talk to, and that will support him. So there is that. It was totally not like a rude joke. It was more like he will be okay.
Yeah, and it evolves though. Like I hate to say it, but in the last year, I've been to 3 funerals for men in their 50s that have chosen to take their lives, and they're all divorced men. A lot of them have taken big swings in terms of professionally. Like a lot of men, if you sort of reach a certain amount of success, say in finance or something like that, they'll leave. Yeah, but then they'll leave the profession and try to take a big swing, like buying a company or, something like that. But those are big financial swings, and sometimes they work out, and other times they can be quite disastrous.
Interesting.
And, people, families go into financial distress, and in the last 3, it's been the men of have it's really, really sad. Like it's definitely a consideration. So anyway, with these men, I always try to tell them, like, we're going to work on your mojo. Like, you're getting your vibe back, because if they've lost a bit of confidence in the divorce, we want to try to make choices so that they really feel good and confident about the home that they're living in. So if it's a condo, like, we choose one super close to the school so that their house is closer to the school than mom's house. So that if anyone wants to come home for lunch, they're coming home to dad's house. We'll get, the amazing party room and movie room, a theater room, so that, kids can have like a birthday party there, the driving range, like that's super fun. And the other big one is the pool, right? So like, let's choose things that make children really excited about the new space and want to come to dad's.
Yeah. And that kind of brings us into the conversation about choosing the second home and what some of the priorities should be. Yeah. What are you, do you think proximity to the other parent would supersede larger or more comfortable space?
100%. Okay. I think proximity is really important. And also, in most legal documents, there is, people negotiate and, that there can be a maximum distance from each other's houses.
Interesting.
But it's just easy. If you can go back and forth, because children are under strain when they, you forget the homework or you forget this and that. And if it's a 20-minute drive back to mom and dad's house all the time,
I hear you.
I think it can be tough. Even psychologically, I think it's nice for children to feel like, oh, well, like if I want to run over to mom's, like it's not too far. So I think it's really important to try to keep them close if you can.
It's funny. My dad moved into a house on the same street.
That's amazing.
I hated it.
You hated it. Oh my gosh, why? Too much?
It was too small, the space. I didn't have my own. I didn't feel like I had my own space. So,
right.
Looking back, there were definitely benefits to the proximity. I could walk back to my mom's house if I needed anything. I did not have a very different commute to school, and I was an athlete. So when I needed a car to get to training, it was easy to decide, am I taking my mom's car or my dad's car? It's not far to get to either. But I always felt growing up that I would have rather him lived farther and had my own space,
Interesting. Okay.
But maybe if that was the case, I would have wanted, the grass is always greener, right?
Who knows? Who knows? Yeah, that's hard to say.
Yeah. But, what are some other priorities you think should be kind of considered when looking at the second home?
Well, definitely school, keeping in the school district for sure. Proximity. I mean, I think it's important to still give each parent a degree of privacy as well. I mean,
it doesn't have to be next door.
Yeah,
they were over a block apart.
Right.
It wasn't like
it wasn't
side by side. That would be a lot.
Some people do that, but I'd say that's important, and also just involve the children in the process, in the choice, work with an agent that is going to make it exciting for them. Like, I sit down with the kids and we just go through like, what are your favorite things? Like, what do you love about houses? What do you hate about houses? Like, let's come up with a fun list together, get the crayons out and the paper. And you know what? Every time you come, when we go look at houses, I want you to put that little list in your purse, like make it fun, and incorporate them into the process. Where are we putting the Christmas tree? Where are we putting the Hanukkah candles? Like, just sort of really engage them. I think a lot of it's just making sure that they feel seen and connected to the space. If they love bikes, well, we got to make sure there's a place for the bikes. Or, they want the hockey rink. Like, will this backyard work for a hockey rink? Like, just really sort of personalizing the process, I think, is important.
We've talked a bit about finding the new home, how to make it feel like home for the kids and for the parents. Let's talk a little bit about how kids actually process the move.
It takes time.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it depends on how they've been communicated with through the process, and if they have been engaged and if they're a part of it or not. But it's certainly, it's an adjustment, right?
Yeah.
For them. And I think you have to give a child probably a year to really settle in, even if they act like they're perfectly fine. I mean, it's there's a newness to it that just
I also think I don't have kids of my own, so of course I can't speak to that, but I do, I love kids. I like to think of myself as like the neighborhood fun aunt.
Yeah.
So like I'll, hang out with my neighbors and their kids and stuff.
Yeah.
And I've always found, one of my neighbors was joking with me last week about how I kind of talk to the kids and treat them just like they're adults, normal people. Like, I'm not like, oh, look at your Barbie. I don't do that. I just talk to them like I'm speaking to you.
Yeah. And
kids have always really responded well to that. So like,
they
generally kids like me. Yeah. And I think it's because I talk to them like they're normal people. And so I think, when I'm dealing with clients who have kids and they're coming to the house and, they're meeting me for the first time, they're like, who's this lady? What is this house? Like, what's going on? Me actually speaking to them like they're humans and giving them some sort of autonomy over their own lives and understanding what's going on, I think goes a lot longer than, when they're kept in the dark, or even if they feel like they weren't really given kind of an opening to share how they're truly feeling. So if, the parents are really pressuring them like, oh, do you love your new room? Like, look, we did this. Yeah. And then they feel like they have to love it.
Yeah.
And they don't feel comfortable going to the parents and saying, listen, I'm really having a hard time with this transition, because they don't want to, whether it's they don't want to hurt the parents or they don't want to feel them to think they're ungrateful, but not having that, like you said, communication, the feeling that they can openly communicate with the parents about how they're feeling. And if they weren't already set up with a child psychiatrist or psychologist, I mean, it's tough.
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, I think obviously as agents, we do not have the education or professional acumen to sort of dive in it to that extent. But what I try to do is give the kids a plan. Like, the more they have an outline of timelines and what's going to happen when, I think the better that they feel. Kids also often just want to know, well, where are they going to go? Like, what is that next space going to be like? So if it's possible to be able to give them some guidelines, we're still staying in the neighborhood, or we're going to move to a house or a condo, or give them a sense of what they can anticipate and when, that predictability calms them.
Yeah.
Quite a bit, because there is a bit of anxiety. Often now in this market, that we're selling houses often before buying. I mean, that's has changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
But as a result, the kid's like, well, my house is up for sale. Where am I going? What am I going to do?
Am I going to have to change schools? Am I going to need to make new friends?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes what we will do is be like, you know what? Saturday morning, we're going to get McDonald's for breakfast, and then we're going to go and look at some examples. We're not going to buy them, but some examples of the types of places that you might be able to live in. And then with teens, I also find engaging them in the process as well, like giving them ownership over certain tasks and responsibilities, as well as buy into the negotiation process. I mean, it's actually great education for a teen to be involved. Like, let's talk through the offer. Let's talk about the clauses. What irrevocable do you think is appropriate? How should we, handle this negotiation together? Do you want to come in at a strong price, or do you think we should start low? Like, really make them feel involved in that. And when you go back, similar to what you're saying about speaking to kids like they're adults, go back to them and actually engage them too. Okay, look, our counter, we're at 1.9. They're at 2.1. What do you think we should do? And then engage their parents.
Yeah.
They go back into that business class in grade 12, and they have an experience that they can reference.
And it makes them feel like they had some control in a situation that they have absolutely no control in. And they feel helpless.
That's it.
Yeah.
Even the lessons around budgeting. Okay, well, this is the amount of money that we have now. What choices are we going to make as a result?
And I also think, generally, of course, with, divorce and separation, there's more complicated emotions along with it.
Yes.
But I have found, especially when working with upsizers and first-time buyers that have kids, the kids generally love the experience. They have such a great time looking at houses. My clients last week brought their kids in to see the house that they bought for the first time. Yeah. They told me that when they broke the news to the kids about the new house, they were sobbing because closing is too far away.
Yeah.
Because they're like, they want to move, and they were so excited looking at the house. This is where we're going to play hockey. This is whose room this is going to be. Such a great experience. And the cutest part, because of course they don't really understand the process of buying a home. They looked at me and they were like, we would like to buy this house. And I was like, oh, good. Did you bring your piggy bank?
Yeah.
Do you have any money for me to buy the house? And they were like, oh, no.
Yeah.
I was like, why'd you forget your money at home if you knew you were going to be buying this house today?
You have to do a few jobs, like go rake some leaves.
Yeah, exactly. But they really, when you kind of explain to them what's going on, they generally seem to enjoy the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you can also be strategic and try to find one thing that sort of ones up the current space that they have, even if they're going to a smaller space, but guess what? Now they get an ensuite, or their closet is a little bigger, or they're going to have that basement. Yeah. Try to really, each parent, we try to come up with a few things that are just better than what they had before, so that they can look forward to, shorter walk to school, a bunk bed so the friends can sleep over now. I think it's important to make the spaces just better in one way or another.
What do you think are some of the best ways to create continuity in this new life with two separate homes?
Double everything.
Okay.
In terms of the possessions, as many of the same things. Like if you're going out to buy a pair of jeans, buy two. All the, with especially I've got 3 girls, so all their Sephora products and their moisturizers and this and that, like having
their skincare routine,
all their skincare, like those. I mean, I think that's the key word, is the routine, right? Being able to have a similar routine in 2 different environments, I think, is important to the kids, because that also creates stability and a feeling of safety for them.
Yeah, because then even though they're maybe in a different environment, their day looks the same. They go to bed at the same time. They do homework at the same time. They have all the same, same setup. They're not kind of needing to change the pattern and rupture their routine each time they alternate. Especially, I know with custody, there are all sorts of different arrangements. Sometimes it's specific days of the week. And so one day you're at your mom's, next day you're at your dad's, and your routine is just completely shifting both times. Whereas if everything stays cohesive, then it just feels like you're sleeping in a different bed, but your day actually looks the same.
Yeah, that's right. Also, if there's animals involved, ideally have the animals travel with the children. So they, keep the kids together. Like if there's a few kids, they ideally should always, sometimes when teens are involved, a teen wants to stay for a week. Sometimes that happens with my eldest. She's 17. She wants to just stay for a full week. But, she's got a 10-year-old sister who can't really be away from one parent to the same extent.
Yeah.
But ideally trying to keep them together, and then trying to, the dog goes with them or the cat goes with them, so that they have that sort of continuity.
Yeah. Yeah. Animals are a whole other piece of the conversation.
Yeah, for sure they are.
And how do you find, what are the best ways to manage moving day?
Being organized, don't close on both in the same day. I mean, that's just
just a rule of thumb. Never, ever.
That is my definite rule of thumb. Yeah. And, try to, have exciting things for the kids and the parents to look forward to. Any of the sort of conflicts, sometimes parents can get a conflict over who's taking the couch and who's doing this and that. Have that all done way in advance and outside of the presence of children. It's amazing how a wooden spoon could suddenly be like a point of contention when people are feeling a little bit raw. So get that done within a private environment. High stress
situations, because they're already stressed enough.
Yeah. And the other thing is inviting the other party into the home as quickly as possible. Right. Mom goes to dad's, checks out dad's new space. Dad goes to mom. It's something that you do together as a family.
Yeah, totally. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see or things people get wrong?
Not informing their children.
Okay.
Not including their children in the process, and then just sort of making that decision, and the children feel that it's forced upon. Another one is if it's a blended family and some kids are moving into an established home, asking children that are already in one space, in one room, to move and have to leave their space because other kids are being involved. I find that leads to a lot of resentment with the kids, like that sort of degree of displacement.
Yeah.
And then, the conflict piece. Being too far away, that can be challenging as well. The other thing is that making sure that there's not too much of a discrepancy in terms of the houses. And if there is a discrepancy, you balance it out. Like just personalizing it. In my case, my ex, PJ, has sort of a newer, more renovated house in Moore Park, and I bought an investment property in Rosedale that's pretty like old and creaky kind of thing. So there's, at this point, mine needs to be renovated. His is totally done. But he's really good about, I will host the girls' birthday parties at his place.
Right.
But I'm running with it. I'm hosting it. Like we sort of try to, if there is the discrepancy, we try to balance it out by being supportive with each other, and sort of recognizing that, you need to compromise. But also big discrepancy there too. Like dad has a tiny, tiny place and mom has like the mansion, because then nobody ever wants to go to dad's.
Yeah.
And that's not fair.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, unfortunately, sometimes that's just where the financial situations lead you.
It is.
And that goes back into what you said about finding other ways. Like maybe it's a smaller condo, but the building has great amenities. So when the kids come over, they get to swim, or they can go to the playroom, or, whatever those are. I think another one is like not trying to win. Like when parents start to compete, I have the better house, or I have this and I have that, versus trying to collaborate so that whatever spaces they each find, the kids will be happy in.
Right. And I mean, look, the best way, honestly, to balance that out is for both parties to move, right? Yeah. Because then they can both equally get a space. But
and a fresh start.
And
so there's no favor for, this is my childhood home, so I obviously like it better.
Yeah, that's right. But, I mean, some people, it's super important to them to keep the family home, and I certainly understand that and respect that. But often if one person leaves, it ends up being, there's the family home, and then there's,
The other.
and dad or mom's little spot, little pied a terre kind of thing. And it's certainly, I think as the children become teens, it's harder for them to want to go to that other place.
Yeah, I think definitely easier when they're younger because they're more amenable. They also take up less space.
Yeah,
personally.
Totally. Yeah.
And then, as they get older, I also think, like I said, for me, that was my space. That was my room. That was where all my stuff was. And so I wanted the same space. I didn't want to have to alternate where I woke up, because I just wanted everything to be the same.
Yeah.
And, whereas when I was younger, I don't remember ever really having much of an issue where I was sleeping. And, it is what it is. I have a toy. I have a TV. What could go wrong?
You're good.
Yeah.
You're good. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think as time goes on, it's certainly harder. I mean, one thing that it doesn't solve the problem, but at least sort of the acknowledgement, especially with teens, like, hey, I know this is hard, and, thank you for going back and forth, and thank you for sort of, packing your stuff up. There's obviously things that not everything can be duplicated, but just sort of acknowledging that, this isn't necessarily the easiest all the time for a teen. At least in my case, I find that helps a little bit, because it is annoying. Yeah. It's super annoying for them.
I think we had a really, kind of somber conversation because, of course, no one necessarily wants to be in this transition. Yeah. But hopefully we gave people some tidbits to make the transition less somber and less difficult.
Yeah. And you know what? I honestly would say most people, if they're at the point where they're looking to get divorced, by the time they go through the transition, like 90% of them are way happier in the end. The women have massive glow ups, like 9 times out of 10. They're looking after themselves more. They're more enriched in life. They're doing different things, getting new hobbies, And the men have often a chance to connect with their children in a different way, to run the show a little bit more. Like, there is some empowerment that comes once you get through that first year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, some light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you so much for coming.
This was really great.
Thank
you for having me. It's been fun.